Hello and what is up, YouTube? My name is G3Iron, and back by popular demand, we are here with another Thinky Thoughts discussion video where today we're trying to answer the question, whatever happened to fun in games? And there's a lot that has changed over the years in game development, in game design. There's a lot of new influences in terms of human psychology and research going into what drives player motivations and what drives player engagement. So there's a lot of different factors going on here for today's discussion. As always, if you'd like to jump ahead or jump back to review something, there is a convenient timestamp placed above in the video subheader directly above my slightly balding forehead, and all of those timestamps are of course hot linked for you down below in the video description. There's a bunch of different research references and continued suggested watching for you to interact with or engage with if this topic fascinates you and you'd like to dive a little bit deeper in that. So that'll be provided, of course, as well in the video description below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and ding the bell if you enjoy discussions like this one and you want to see more of them on the channel. So, all that being said, whatever happened to fun in games? Our first disclaimer and only disclaimer for this particular video is simply this. Some of these things that I'm going to name will have both positive and negative examples of the ideas and thoughts that I'm sharing with you. So some of these topics that are going to be mentioned are going to be more industry related or industry focused on the business side of games, and some are more community focused on how we as players interact with games. So this isn't the definitive discussion, the end-all be-all exhaustive discussion on the history of games or even on what potentially is going on in games right now. Rather, this is just an overview and an opinion piece on what I personally think about some of the things that are happening in the games industry and to us as a gaming community together, and the state of fun as a primary motivator in games. That's really what we're digging into here today. So, disclaimers aside, we've got a bunch of contributing factors to the world or to the ecosystem that is gaming today. If you think about an ecosystem requires a lot of different things to survive and for life to thrive in an ecosystem. An environment's got to be very, very particular and very, very welcoming to certain life forms in order for it to become a home biosphere for and living organism to choose to call it home and to build base camp in a particular environment. And gaming is no different than that. We've got a lot of contributing factors that make gaming a home for a lot of us in our hobby time as well as our professional time. So first off, one of the biggest contributing factors to the biosphere that is gaming right now, to the environment that is gaming, is the internet. And in the internet today, we've got esports that are just booming off the charts. When I first started interacting professionally with gaming back in 2012 and 2013 was when I started my research and started consulting. Esports was really just from my research perspective was just getting started. I know that's going to tick some of you off because I know that whenever I start things historically at the 2012, 2013 experiential level, people go, no, esports has been going on for a long time, and Halo was going on and Counter-Strike was going on. I'm not saying that that 2012 or 2013 is when esports started. I'm simply saying that's when my experience in esports started in interacting with it. So don't hear what I'm not saying. So right now we're in an environment that has really blossomed and boomed. You know, if you want to use the famous mushroom cloud analogy of a nuclear bomb, we are in the midst of a mushroom cloud of esports that has taken off primarily because the internet allows us to. If we were still living in a world like the 1990s where a lot of people, if you've got internet, you've got dial-up internet, and you don't necessarily have consistent connections, you aren't necessarily able to commit to a 40 minute to 4 hour long session online. Those sorts of infrastructural problems and potential snafus just don't allow for consistent esports performance and for people to enjoy a consistent esports broadcast. So esports today in the environment that we're in is absolutely a contributing factor to gaming as an environment. Also, we've got Twitch. So people wanting to sit and not just play games for an extended period of time on the internet, but watch other people play games for an extended period of time on the internet. And of course, Twitch isn't the only broadcasting service, but of course, here in the West, it is certainly the biggest. And since it's been attached and bought out by Amazon a couple of years ago, it has simply grown in its footprint and in its cultural relevance, with more and more channels that are not even necessarily gaming focused, but are targeted towards gamers, becoming more and more prevalent. So esports and Twitch are both internet factors. Also YouTube, of course, we are a YouTube community right here that's interacting. We make videos and we chat and we hang out, all via YouTube, which is kind of this really interesting amalgamation of social media along with, of course, a news network service, along with a multimedia platform where you can stream or you can watch something that's delayed, or you can keep something for posterity and go back and look at something from years and decades ago, and that's all stored via YouTube. So it's this massive combination of, your favorite forum, your favorite video hub, your favorite social media. It's all combined together, and then it's curated for you. So all of these things contribute to the environment that we are in right now for fun in gaming. And when I bring all of these up, it all comes into this head to say that the internet has forever changed the way that we play games. For better or for worse. Remember the disclaimer. Some things that we're going to mention are going to be positive. Some things we're going to mention are going to be negative. For some people, having the internet available to them while they are playing a game means that they have to be using it. So a lot of us here in the G3 community play Path of Exile, and I'm simply going to throw this out there. Path of Exile is one of the games where one of the things that many of us love so much about Path of Exile is the third-party programs that are available and supported, and built by community members for community members. It's not necessarily built for profit. Those are all things that we all love about Path of Exile. And just to name drop a few of them, right, we can talk about Path of Building, which many of us would not have access to if we couldn't go and download it on the internet, although it's an offline program. We're talking about things like PoE Lab, so whenever we're running the Labyrinth, we know what the layout is of that day. We're talking about things like PoE Ninja for actually going and observing what the market is doing. We're talking about PoE Trade, which trade inside Path of Exile would not exist if we didn't have the internet in its infancy to actually trade and interact with one another. And of course, now we've got wonderful market websites and all sorts of things like PoE Trade, as well as the official Path of Exile trade website. So all of these things contribute together to create an environment where we are now dependent on the internet to play games. And this isn't even mentioning games that simply require you to connect to the internet, right? Again, Path of Exile is another example of this, where the game cannot be run or played in an offline mode. And more games nowadays have this sort of online persistent requirement for you to actually interact and play the game. So the internet has, for better or for worse, forever changed the way how we perceive and interact with games. Also, games as a business is a big factor. So when we talk about games as a business, there's a couple of things here. First off, games as a product. What do I mean when I say games as a product? A game that is a product is something that is simply sold to you for a particular amount of money, and it's a simple one-time interaction or exchange. So I'm going to use a Sharpie as an example. I've purchased a pack of Sharpies, and I now own this Sharpie. Right? It is now mine. I've given money to a store, and I now have the Sharpie. It is now forever mine. Games as a product, when they are built as a product, they need to be a finished product, because if I purchase a Sharpie and I pop open the cap and I go to write something with my Sharpie and it doesn't write, it's not a finished product. They're not going to keep me as a return customer to come back and buy more Sharpies or other related products, because it's a terrible product if it doesn't work, if it doesn't actually function. So when a game is sold and manufactured, built, designed from the ground up as a product to be sold as a complete item, if it doesn't do that, then all of us as gamers, because we've got the internet available to us, say, don't go buy this game. It's terrible. It's not a complete product. And we've seen this with a lot of different product manufactured games or built games that have been designed, and then their business model are built around being a product where they're going to simply sell you a full-priced game, maybe $60 for AAAs. I'm sure some of you have been burned by some of those titles. And then you go and you play it, and maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it doesn't load right. Maybe it doesn't cooperate with your particular gaming machine. Maybe there are simply so many different glaring problems with the actual game itself that you are disgusted with it as a product and you never want to interact with it. Ubisoft got a lot of flack for several years with Assassin's Creed. Bethesda gets a ton of flack because the Fallout games seem to come out as a product, but then they rely on the community in order to change and fix a lot of the bugs. Most notably, of course, Fallout 76 and Fallout 4 being massive examples of this. So games as a product, what I mean by this is games as a product are built to be one single individual product sold to you for a particular amount of money, and then that's it. That's the interaction. That's the exchange. Games as a business have changed and moved away from games as a product. Games are now seen more as a service. What do I mean, games as a service? Imagine for a moment if there was a Sharpie club that you could join, and you would say, you know what I'm going to do? Rather than constantly go to the retail store of my own choosing and regularly purchase Sharpies because I use Sharpies and I need to get a replenishment of my Sharpies, you can join the Dollar Sharpie Club, and every single month they're going to send you a new Sharpie for the low payment of 99 cents a month. You might say, hey, this is great. I don't need to go to the retailer. This is a wonderful convenience. But now the reality is your relationship with Sharpie is now no longer simply based on making a one-time transaction, a one-time product for monetary exchange, product for economic exchange interaction. It is now based on a continual, ongoing, regular, repeat service that is being provided for you. So yes, you're still receiving a product. You're still receiving the Sharpie every single month. But if there's problems with the Sharpie, you're going to get another one next month. So there's a lot more grace maybe that's given or extended, or there's a lot more demand that's placed upon the business to say, look, if you guys screw up this month, we demand that you really hit the nail on the head the next month. If you send me a Sharpie that's defaulty this month, I can write you an angry email and say, hey, my Sharpie didn't work this month. And they can say, we're so sorry about that. Here's an additional Sharpie that we're going to send to you for next month, and we're going to give you a referral code to give to one of your friends who will then receive free Sharpies as well for 1 month. You go, hey, that's fantastic. The company gets to keep you as a loyal customer. The company gets to build reputation with you essentially as a loyal customer. They just extended their reach because they just gave you the ability to invite somebody else into their Sharpie their Sharpie Club month, service. So that's games as a service. When you think of games as a service as opposed to a product, it really is the difference between a one-time transaction versus a repeated, ongoing, continual relationship that there is financial incentive and financial interchanges going on between the company and between the user. Most games nowadays are designed with games as a service in mind, no longer games as a product in mind. Okay, third factor for the games as a business model. Games as a passion is a tough one to tackle because we are now in an age where more and more people can simply say, hey, I've got a passion for gaming. I'm going to learn how to code, or I'm going to use the various tools that are available to me to go and create my own game and design my own game. And so this has given rise to the entire indie scene, what we know of as the indie scene, and it's great and it's wonderful, where so many different people who are passionate about games can go and be passionate, and they've got the tools at their disposal to make games that they're passionate about, and that's great. But games as a business has essentially shifted, where games used to be, for the most part, and feel free to point this out if you want to challenge me on this. Again, this is just my opinion, but games for the most part, when they were initially first invented and designed, they were initially designed as a passion product, as a passion project to be marketed as a product if they were ever marketed at all. They were primarily something that was to be meant to be enjoyed, to be played with, and oftentimes games were actually rooted in the toy industry for a lot of their development. We're talking back in the 90s, the 80s, as well as the 70s. All of that has shifted, and games have become more and more of a product, less and less of a passion, and then less and less of a product and more of a service. As we've kind of migrated along that spectrum or that history of gaming, things have changed a lot, where now people aren't looking at games that they want to design and make and play because they're passionate about games, but rather games are looked at as a business opportunity. And so people are looking at careers in games, not simply because they enjoy games. They might enjoy games, but because it is a good career path to choose. There are options. There's will be viable skills that you can learn and pick up that will be available to you throughout the rest of your life. So games as a business have really, really changed the environment that we are in as we are looking to play and enjoy the games that we all play and enjoy. Other contributing factors are hype. Okay, hype has really changed, and of course, this is I put this adjacent to the internet because it really is attached to the internet. Marketing and hype for games are very, very different now than if we put on our nostalgia goggles from, say, the early 2000s and 1990s and even the 80s. Games and pre-ordering of games have really changed the environment that we are in. So nowadays, when you purchase something on a pre-order basis, what this does as a consumer to a gaming business is you're no longer making a comment about the product, right? Let's go back to our Sharpie example. If Sharpie comes out and says, we've got a new Sharpie that's coming out, it's going to blow you away. It's going to meet all of your wonderful hopes and desires that you could ever have for a Sharpie. It's going to have, let's say, a flashlight on the end of it. So this Sharpie is no longer just a Sharpie. It's also a flashlight. Oh my gosh, mind-blowing. Wow, that's amazing, right? So then a bunch of us go out and we pre-order the Sharpie / flashlight. Well, what happens then is we're no longer making purchases evaluating the quality of the product. What happens if the flashlight doesn't work? What happens if there are bugs in the system? What happens if the light bulb is a terrible light bulb for the flashlight? What happens if the battery life of it is terrible and it doesn't really last? What happens if the quality of the actual marker deteriorates because they're trying to fit a flashlight inside a marker now, right? All of those factors evaluating the Sharpie as a product go out the door. They all go out the door because when you pre-order something, you are no longer making a comment about the product, and what you are commenting on is the marketing and the hype that went into building up the sales of the product. Let that sink in for a minute. When you pre-order something, you are not commenting on the quality, the fun, or the enjoyment, or the quality of the product. You are making a comment on the hype and the marketing of that product. So when we pre-order games as a collective community, we are not commenting, hey, you guys did a great job with that boss. Hey, you did a great job with that particular character progression. Hey, you guys did an awesome job with building the challenges of the games and the interaction and the gameplay loop. We love that. And the coding and the graphics and the engagement and the social community aspects. We're not commenting on any of that with our dollars. When you pre-order something, all you are commenting on, you guys did a great job of telling me this will be a great game. That's all you did. When you make a pre-order, you are not commenting on the quality of the game. You are only commenting on the quality of the hype and the marketing that went on before the game ever comes out. Some of you may counter this down in the comments below. I welcome you to counter any of these positions that I take up. I'm happy to interact with you. Some of you may counter, oh, but Iron, what if it's a really trustworthy game company that I've bought previous games from and I really love everything that they do? That's great. You're still commenting on past actions. You're commenting on their ability to build up a hype train and to market to you that this product will be a good product. It has no indication and no interactive sense of you saying what the product actually is. It is all a future promise of what that product or what that game, what that service will look like. It has nothing to do with what it actually is. I will just give one really quick personal example on this. When Fortnite first was announced, I loved it. Some of you are going to go, what? What? Iron, we've heard you critique and say you don't really enjoy Fortnite. That's true, because the iteration of Fortnite that is so worldwide popular right now, Fortnite Royale, was not what Fortnite originally was. And when I got to play early access, alpha and beta access to Fortnite, it was very much community-based. It was very much strategy-based. It was very much, Minecraft meets tower defense meets an RPG meets co-op with your friends. There were so many aspects of that I enjoyed, as well as this kind of strategy layer, sort of city building aspect that was going on top of the actual gameplay of being inside a mission. Loved all of that stuff. Then Fortnite comes out, Save the World comes out, the game actually comes out, play it with a few friends. We sort of enjoy it. It still has elements of what we played in alpha and beta, but it had already started to take a different direction. The sales for it plummeted. People didn't like it. PUBG was taking off, and Epic goes, hey, we're going to pivot and do a Battle Royale game. All of a sudden, it's free to play Battle Royale, so you don't have to compete with all of the other Battle Royales, which were pay to play at that point in time. It's a wonderful, massive success. It is a huge business achievement, and I applaud Epic Games that they made that decision and that has financed Fortnite and paid the entire team that built on that. That's great. I think that's wonderful from a business standpoint. Good job for them. That being said, I pre-ordered Fortnite. I bought into it before I ever played it or saw anybody else play it based on my alpha and beta experience. So when I purchased the game, pre-ordered it, and then played it, I was very dissatisfied with the product, but guess what? I had already spent my money on the product, and so I already told Epic, hey, I love whatever it is that you're going to do. Rather than withholding my money and saying, let me try this out, let me see what this thing looks like, and then I'll decide whether or not I'm going to actually put money down on it. So pre-orders have absolutely changed things. Alpha access purchases have absolutely changed games in very much the same way that pre-ordering has done. Although now you get to purchase your way into test out a very, very bugged system. I will give a couple of examples of this maybe down below in the comments. I'm sure some of you can come up with examples of this. For Honor is one of them. Another one is DayZ, which has DayZ ever officially actually left its alpha or pre-alpha testing zone? That's another example. I would say that Heroes of the Storm, when Heroes of the Storm first came out, it was very, very interesting that Blizzard for a period of time actually sold Blizzard sold Heroes of the Storm as a game. They actually put a monetary value behind it as a product before reverting it back to free to play. And there were alpha purchases that you could make inside the alpha of the game, which it's a little bit different than pre-ordering because you actually get to interact with the game. But I would say it's just one step away from it, because oftentimes in an alpha version of a game or in a beta version of a game, when you're putting money down on that game, oftentimes it's going to get wiped. And if it doesn't get wiped, you have no guarantee that the game is going to continue to stay in the iteration that you played it in alpha or beta. So just be aware of that the hype that is now existing because of the internet, because of the exposure of the internet, and because of the way that marketing works nowadays with social media, with esports coverage, and with esports publicity through Twitch and through YouTube, everything has changed in the gaming environment from what was the early 2000s and late 1990s. Lastly, the Greenlight program, which of course is known and hallmarked, championed really by Steam, which allows for small indie developers to greenlight their games to potentially gather some funding. I'm going to throw Patreon in here, and I'll also throw Kickstarter in here. Ways in which people can say, look, I'm going to be making this game and I'd love for you to financially support the game. Here's what it is. Now, you might be saying, Iron, that's really strange for you to pick on Greenlight or to point out Kickstarter as a bad thing. Remember how I said in the disclaimer, some of these things are going to be positive, some of these things are going to be negative. I think Greenlight is a wonderful system. I think Kickstarter is a wonderful system. I think it's great in theory. I think the problem with these sorts of systems are that, once again, this focuses on the marketing, the ability to market and raise funds for your own project, as opposed to actually demonstrating that, hey, here is something that you will enjoy, that you will think is fun, and so because here's something that's fun, you ought to give me money to have access to this fun thing. That is a business model, and that is a hype train. That's why I've included it in the hype train rather than the business model, that really promotes, again, marketing and sales rather than actually delivering a product or a service that is fun. Right? Do you see the disconnect there, where we live in an environment right now where people are exchanging money for pre-orders, for alpha purchases, and for green lights for Kickstarters that have nothing to do with the finished product of the game. It has everything to do with the hype that's built around the game. You're not really purchasing the game when you give $60 for a pre-order. You're not really purchasing the game or making a comment on the status and the quality of the game when you make an alpha purchase. And you're not really commenting on the faith that you have in the actual game that you've experienced or seen that is fun. You're commenting when you back a Kickstarter on the sales and the marketing. It might be that you want to choose to say, hey, this is great. I love this. I want to support the sales and the marketing. Just realize that this is the environment that we are now in with gaming. Early access is all of these things beyond and extended. It is a terrible, terrible decision to purchase a full game in early access. And oftentimes what games will do nowadays is they will tell you, hey, for the full purchase price of this particular game, you can have all of these awesome features, and you're going to get a lifetime battle pass, or you're going to get a lifetime, achievement award, or your account is going to have these awesome effects that are always attached to it for this early access. And there are so many games that offer these incentives to get the finances going behind a game for early access and to get the game really going. And so much of the time, it's just a carrot on the end of a stick. That's all it is. And it's saying to gamers, hey, if you give us this money, we're going to make you this awesome game. And that is a totally reversed scenario from games as a product that says, hey, we made this awesome game. Would you guys pay for it? It's a totally reverse scenario. It's saying, hey, we will make this game if you give us enough money. And that, in the early access, we've seen it time and time again. So many games never leave early access, even though people have paid for it. Leave us a comment down below and let us know what games you've maybe purchased early access or supported, and the game maybe never left, or maybe never shipped, or maybe never went out, or whatever it is that was the finished iteration of the game. Maybe it never happened. Now, in all of these ways, these are ways in which people can build up the hype train for a passion product, and build connection with you as a customer, with us as a community, as a customer. But the reality is this is fundamentally an environment where hype is prioritized more than fun. So if we're wondering, hey, what happened to all the fun in gaming? Well, things nowadays are more about hype than they are about fun, oftentimes in the marketability of games. Okay, next thing, yearly updates. I put this across from games as a business because oftentimes there are games that are released that basically come out on an annual or semi-annual basis that are pretty much the same product, maybe even run off the same engine, maybe even have the same mechanics, but every single year they're going to sell you a full-priced game. So there's a couple of really egregious versions or examples of this, one of them being the FIFA and the Madden sports examples of this, where every single year a new roster update essentially gets released, where there's maybe like one or two mechanics that get changed in the sports games, but maybe they're running off of the same engine. Maybe they've updated a few graphical fixes or graphical animations. But really what's going on is every single year they're selling you a product, they're selling you that Sharpie for the full price, and they expect you to buy it. So you could look at it like, hey, this is just like games as a service where every single year I'm paying for an update. It used to be, and I can remember this back in college, it used to be that we used to make custom rosters for our various sports games that we played back in the day when I was in college, where we didn't have internet updates. There weren't roster updates that you could go down. You had to manually go in and create new players if there were new players that were entering into whatever sports game it was that you were playing. You had to update the models and do all that yourself. But it saved you $60 of buying the new game. And there was one year in particular, again, personal story, personal example, feel free to push back, but there was a year where I think it was either Madden 2003, 2004, 2005, where I remember explicitly there were no updates to the mechanics except for a couple of changes with like the hit stick, how you tackled somebody in this football game. And that was it. That was the only mechanical change. And so me and my roommate, we looked at each other like, hey, should we just keep playing like our competitive games on this old version? We were like, yeah, we should. We've already dumped all this time into this. There really aren't any changes except for a couple of roster changes. And there aren't even really that many big roster changes that are going to happen. And we can manually go in and make all of those changes. Is it worth $60 for us in college, poor college guys, to go in and to go in together and buy a new game for $60 full? And we decided no. And then from there on out, I saw this trend developing where like for 3 years in a row, it was the same engine with, again, one or two mechanical tweaks. So again, if you've got other examples where you're like, oh, Iron, you're totally off on that, feel free to leave me a comment below. But that's just a small personal anecdote looking back at how yearly updates have really changed the way how the gaming environment and the gaming biosphere interacts. Assassin's Creed is another great example of this, where this is basically the same game all the time. It's just they're just changing and tweaking a little bit of the stories. Those of you that are big Assassin's Creed fans, that's fine. You can come at me, bro. Feel free to hate the video and leave me some vitriol down below in the comments. But Assassin's Creed essentially did this as well in its worst editions and in its worst form, where there weren't necessarily updates or massive updates to the gameplay engine. There was always the same iconic animations. And again, you might want to argue, hey, Iron, those animations are iconic precisely because they're in every single edition of Assassin's Creed. And those styles of gameplay are iconic because they are iconic to the Assassin's Creed franchise. I would argue that Assassin's Creed was making boatloads of money simply by updating the textures and saying, hey, this is Assassin's Creed in a different historical setting. Hey, here's Assassin's Creed in another historical setting. I would argue that there's very little difference between that and my 3-year-old little son who wants to go and play Knights And so he dresses up like a knight versus when he wants to go and play dress up as a cowboy, right? Really, he's doing the same thing. He's chasing around his sisters and he's either got a sword or a pistol, but he's doing the same thing. He's really playing tag, and just the MTX or the effects, the graphics of what it is that he's doing are the same. But other than that, the gameplay's pretty much the same. And he doesn't pay $60 for new updates every single year. So that's my counter to that about Assassin's Creed. All right, so I've got a couple of hypotheses here. First off, this is our first hypothesis. So games nowadays aren't made to be fun products. Okay, based off of everything that we just said, based off describing the entire games industry and biosphere that we just described in the environment. Games nowadays are not made to be fun products. They're not made to be a single Sharpie where they give you a product and you give the industry money. They are made to be ongoing services that are fueled by microtransactions. So if you think about it, think about your phone as a service where you're purchasing not only your digital phone service that you're purchasing, but also all of the different in-app purchases that you are purchasing. You might say, oh, Iron, but that's just phones. Well, take a look at the games that are the most popular worldwide games, and you'll see that the vast majority of them are services with ongoing fees or with microtransactions attached to them, where they're hoping that every time you get a paycheck, you're going to give them a little bit of your paycheck through microtransactions. So they're fueled by these microtransactions as a service, and fun isn't as easily measured as financial success. So it's tough for a business to say, hey, you know what, user 12687 really is having fun with our game. Because unless user 12687 says, hey, I'm having fun with this game, you just can't track that. Now, you can track their gameplay, you can track their gameplay time, their game engagement, you can track what sort of things they're posting on social media about it, but you can't necessarily say this person thinks it's fun. They could just be addicted and not actually having fun in a game. I know for a fact that there are several of us in the G3 community that have raised their hand and said, you know what, at a certain point I realized I wasn't actually having fun in this game, I was just addicted to it. So that is a possibility. It's a lot harder to track fun than it is to track financial success. Because every time there's a financial transaction as a business, you go, hey, we're processing more money. It's simply a more measurable metric. So because it is simply less difficult to make a financially successful game than it is to make a motivationally fun game, a lot more games are going, hey, let's measure ourselves by our financial success than by our fun or by our pop culture fun success. So this is true for free-to-play games, especially as they rely on continual purchases from the games community, whether that's Fortnite, whether that's League of Legends, whether that's Dota, whether that's Path of Exile, whatever free-to-play game you want to pick as an example of this, they depend and they survive based on the in-game purchases that you make from continually playing the game and from continually buying things that are then made available throughout the lifespan of the game. And nowadays, even full-price titles made by major-time, big-time developers, the biggest developers in the game, or in the games industry, have got purchase costs as well as in-game purchases associated. So games nowadays are not made to be, hey, here's your Sharpie, give me some money for it. They are made to be, hey, join our Sharpie Club. You can have an initial purchase to join the Sharpie Club, and we're going to send you more Sharpie stuff every single month, and you're going to every single month continually give us more money. So that's my Genesis hypothesis. That's how games are made. That's why I'm calling it the Genesis hypothesis here. This is oftentimes what's going in at the very beginning of the business and discussion end of things in the games industry. This is how games are at the highest echelon decision making from a games business discussion standpoint. This is how they're made. It's hey, how are we going to progress forward with a business model? And oftentimes you see games floundering when they don't necessarily know what business model they're going to choose. And so right now, in the current economic system that we are in and the current environment that we are in, oftentimes games as a service with microtransactions is the genesis of a game right now, not fun. So if fun isn't the primary motivator, if financial success is, maybe that's where some of the fun has gone. All right, got a second hypothesis for us. I'm going to call this the Exodus hypothesis about people leaving games, or why people would choose to leave games, or why game companies would want you to leave. So games don't want a player to leave a game, ever, period. Right? It's a trackable thing that a game can do, is to say, we don't want you to leave. And games nowadays, maybe mobile games are probably the most guilty of this, that enforce on you a break, where you have to take a break, or there's a cooldown on your abilities for, let's say, a 24 or a 12-hour period. Games that do this oftentimes will have the cooldown be unlocked by what? By purchases, by microtransactions. You don't have to wait 12 hours if you pay us $1.99. You don't have to wait for your cooldown or for your troops or for your farms to grow if you just pay us X amount of rubies, and you can buy more rubies in our cash shop. So games don't ever want a player to leave the game, and oftentimes they will actually introduce challenges that will try to make you leave the game to test and see, hey, how much are you willing to pay us to actually stay in the game, because we want you to pay to play our game, even if you didn't pay us originally to play the game, even if it was a free-to-play game to begin with. So games don't ever want a player to leave the game. In an ideal world, from a corporate game standpoint, there would never need to be a sequel to a game. So I'm going to give a couple examples here. So there would never need to be a World of Warcraft 2. A lot of people have clamored, oh, maybe they should do a new engine and do a World of Warcraft 2. There's never going to need to be a Path of Exile 2. There's never going to need to be a Fortnite 2. There's never going to need to be a League of Legends 2 or a Rocket League 2 or a Hearthstone 2 or a Dota 2. Sequels aren't needed in today's ecosystem of gaming. And they're not wanted, because what that would do is they would devalue the first iteration of the game, which again was a service, and so there's still people working on it and there's still people making money from it. And it would also risk the relationship between the service provider and the customer. So if a games industry executive looks and says, you know what, we're making a bunch of money off of this free-to-play game in its first iteration. Let's make a second one, because maybe that'll make us more money. They look at the metrics and they go, yeah, but this is how much it's going to cost us to make a second one versus this is how much it's going to cost us just to keep updating this first one. And there's no risk of us losing the first player base or splitting the player base from having a first iteration versus a second iteration of a game, or having a prequel and a sequel sort of phenomenon. There's simply no risk to saying, let's just dump all of our eggs into this one initial basket that's really, really successful. Why risk everything by making a sequel? There is that old proverb that if something ain't broke, you ought not to fix it, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or the Aesop's fable sort of proverbial tale of, you know, if you've got the golden goose that lays the golden egg, don't kill it. Don't kill the golden goose. Find your golden goose and then just ride that thing until it stops laying golden eggs. Then you can kill it and start over. So in this world where games don't want players to leave games, and where there's no incentive for a game company to ever make a second edition or a sequel of a game, if you stop having fun with a games company doesn't care. Okay? Saying that loudly and clearly. Games company doesn't care if you stop having fun in the game. Because as long as you're still playing it, that's a metric they can measure. If you stop having fun in a game, but you're logging in because you've got daily to-dos, daily chores, well, great. From a game's perspective, you're still interacting with the game on an everyday basis, which means that whenever there's a new market or a new sale or a new microtransaction or a new expansion, a new DLC, a new thing that they want you to purchase, because you're logging on every single day to play, there's more chances that you're going to see that and interact with it and give them more money for the game. Now, you might say, oh, but Iron, if I'm not having fun with a game, why would I put money into it? There's, again, massive amounts of human research that's going into making games incentivize you to give them money, even if you're not enjoying the game. So those of you that are going to say, oh, but that's predatory, oh, that's unethical, oh, that's wrong, that's another discussion for another video. That's just the reality of it. All right. If a game can't measure whether or not you're having fun, I think there's also a discussion to be had on whether or not a game can measure whether or not you're addicted to it or not. If you're choosing to give a game company money, that's on you. Now, are there ways that we need to progress as a society and as a gaming community to help people that are addicted, especially to games which are primarily designed to be addictive? Absolutely. There need to be measures as well as awareness that's created of that. But what I'm saying here is simply from a game's perspective, if they can't measure if you're having fun or not, if all they're measuring is your financial involvement and your time involvement in a game, they would never make a sequel. And so those of you that don't enjoy or have used up all of the fun in a game, maybe you look at a game and you say, hey, I've had a lot of fun in this game, but now I'm not having any fun and I wish they would make a sequel. They're not going to make a sequel. Don't hold your breath waiting, because they're still making money on the first one. And so even though you've stopped having fun in that first one, chances are it's going to be a long time before a sequel comes out. And chances are there would actually need to be a big change in the ecosystem and the environment of gaming to actually incentivize a company to change its model from being free to play or being a service in order to say, hey, we need to go back to the old way of doing things where we're actually making games as a product and selling sequels. Now, you might say, Well, Iron, the only reason to motivate players to leave a game is because financially there are more benefits in releasing a sequel than in refining the original. And this does happen. There are several franchises that do this. So, franchises like maybe Final Fantasy or Battlefield or Assassin's Creed or Madden, FIFA or Call of Duty, maybe GTA. There are franchises that do this, right? That do release new games. So you might say, oh, Iron, there definitely are sequels that are still out there. Games still continue. Yes, but when you look at this, games don't come out as a sequel anymore simply because it's a two-set game. Games come out as a franchise where every single year or every other year, there are whole new games or whole new expansions that are coming out where a studio's entire financial business model survives off of having a new game that comes out. That's just the reality of it. So you might look at this and say, "Oh, well, that's cool. There's always a sequel to the new favorite game that I like playing." And I would simply reference you back that really this isn't actually a whole new product that's being released on its own. Again, I will use the Assassin's Creed example. Oftentimes these games, because they're being pushed out every single year or every other year, there's no need to refine the game. I'm going to go back to our Sharpie here. There's no need to say, oh, that Sharpie's a bad product. We need to go back to the drawing board and fix it. It's rather much, much more financially beneficial for the game's producer and for the game's industry to say, okay, this Sharpie was terrible. This Sharpie was a flop. That's fine. We've got our next Sharpie that's coming out next year, so don't worry about it. That's a thing. So for those of you that look at games and go, oh, why is it that this game over here that I bought last year was absolutely terrible and now they've lost me as a customer and I'm outraged, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I just go and I look at the stock trade and the stock options of a particular games company or of a particular publisher, and I look at it and it goes, oh yeah, there was a little blip where people were upset, but guess what? There's a hype train coming for the next year's edition of that same game and the stock price just keeps going up. So as a community, again, we might be saying, oh, well, if they screw up on a product, I'm really going to be upset. I'm not going to purchase their next one. The numbers actually suggest no. We're all still purchasing the next one, and we're all still enabling terrible products to simply be flushed away down the toilet, to let our money be flushed away down the toilet, and for us to fall into the same hype cycle for the next thing. Third and final hypothesis that I've got here today for whatever happened to fun in games. I'm going to call this the influence and excellence hypothesis. And so this revolves around motivating factors of competitiveness. Not all of us are competitive gamers, but almost every game will have people involved in their community who are competitive. And whenever there's a chance for competitiveness in a gaming environment, some portion of the player base or community will get competitive. Once you have a portion of your player base that gets competitive, this is more about us now as players than us game industry. We've talked for a while now about the industry, but now we're talking about us as players. Whenever a portion of a gaming community gets competitive, there are some consequences to that. For everyone else who isn't competitive, they begin to feel like they're losing or they're behind if they aren't following what has been judged as the best options or the most OP options or the most optimal or the most valued choices in the game. One quick example of this that I'll just give us in Path of Exile. Chris Wilson, one of the lead developers he is the lead developer at Grinding Gear Games for Path of Exile, has said multiple times that if players have an option between choosing to do more content that's fun or do more content that's rewarding, players will choose not to have fun and they will choose to do the more rewarding content, because otherwise they feel like they're behind. The penalty and the risk, the human psychological factors that are going on of feeling behind feels worse for us than the good feeling of feeling like we're having fun. So even though we might not be having fun in a game, if we feel like we're still making a choice that is more valued or more OP or that is more worth our time, even if it's not fun, a lot of people will do it. I will cite two recent examples of this in Path of Exile. One is Delve Darkness farming. A lot of people did not enjoy Delve Darkness farming, but because it was financially a good decision and a very, very lucrative decision during Delve League, a lot of people did darkness farming in order to make currency to then go play whatever fun build they would have. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying that was simply a decision that players chose to make, and Grinding Gear Games heavily nerfed that to say we don't want players to choose to be more effective rather than choose to have more fun. So that's one example of that. The second example is the betrayal mechanic in Path of Exile. A lot of people chose, rather than having all sorts of different fun interactions and potentially fun combinations with the betrayal board, people chose, I'm going to go for the single most optimal pathing that is going to be most financially incentivizing for me. players would run the same instance over and over and over and over again in order to get the most financial reward. Some players saw this as fun, but what happened was a lot of players didn't necessarily see this as fun. They saw it as a chore, but they saw it as a very, very profitable chore. And so then when players enter their gaming space, when players and community members are choosing to use their hobby time to have fun, we are no longer choosing to have fun, but we're choosing essentially to go to work and to do another job, to do something that isn't fun because it pays for the stuff that is fun. That's the environment that we're in right now. Not just in Path of Exile, but this is true across the board in gaming. If there is a more optimal way to do things, people will choose to do the more optimal thing and sacrifice their fun because it feels worse to have fun but feel like you're behind than to not have fun but feel like you're ahead. Peer pressure is a big part of this. This is why I call this both the excellence and influence hypothesis. Peer pressure, regardless if it's from a friend or from the community at large, via YouTube, via Twitch, via your favorite streamer, via your favorite guildmate, via a personality that you follow on social media. The community is a massive influencer on other community members, on players. So if thousands of people, or maybe not even thousands of people, but if the perception is that thousands of people say this game isn't fun or this mechanic isn't fun, and they make a compelling argument for it in any sort of way that is also something that touches on your own personal experience, where somebody's complaining about something and it's not fun, and so then you attach to that and you go, hey, you know what? I did that thing too, and that wasn't fun. You're right. If there's anything that's compelling about the argument that's made for it, then chances are the game actually loses at least some of its potential market appeal. That's just the reality of it. So influencers play a big part in the gaming world at large right now. And we see this all the time on Twitch, where variety streamers stream new games every other day or every weekend or whatever the cycle is, where a bunch of different people who are top tier, I mean, people who are financially streaming and making a living off of streaming games, where they will stream various different games, oftentimes because they're being commissioned to do so in order to have an influence on the wider gaming community at large. We know for a fact that a lot of people were paid to play Apex Legends during its massive opening weekend. And for a lot of people that enjoy Apex Legends, they enjoy it, and you may enjoy the gameplay of it, but the reality is that at least some of the success of Apex Legends right now is due to the marketing and the peer pressure, the positive reviews that were given by a bunch of community influencers inside the community, the gaming community space, all playing Apex when it first came out, and everybody saying this game is amazing, everybody should go out and download it. That's at least a factor. So that's my third hypothesis, the influence excellence hypothesis. So, last point here. If something is judged as lame, regardless if it is lame or not, it often gets pushed to the fringe of the community. So those of you that are wondering, what does that mean? Well, that simply means if something is seen and as a broken game or as a broken system, it's going to get pushed away, regardless if it actually is or not. So in other words, people will trust whoever their influencer is, whether that's a Twitch streamer, whether that's a YouTuber, whether that's a particular article writer, whether that's a particular friend on social media. If something is judged as lame, regardless if it is actually lame or not, a lot of players will go back and try something that somebody else has said is lame and go, oh, I actually really enjoy this game. Regardless if it is lame or simply perceived as being lame, it will get pushed off to the side. So people who are designing games maybe to be fun and are not designing them as a service or as a product just to make money, maybe if it gets judged as not fun but gets judged as lame, it's just going to get pushed off. This is how sometimes there are underground games where you go, oh man, I've never heard of that game, and it's like 4 years old, but it's really fun. This is how that happens, because that game didn't have a massive hype cycle, didn't have a massive market cycle on the internet, using Twitch, using YouTube, using all of the various social media influencers that are out there, and simply say, oh, this game's really fun, how come I've never heard of it? Well, because a bunch of people weren't getting paid to play it, or because a bunch of people didn't discover it all simultaneously and push it and market it to the community as a whole. So I've got some wild assertions here as we wrap up. First off, maybe there's actually fun still in games. Maybe games haven't actually changed that much, but maybe you have. That's the first wild assertion. Maybe if you're not having fun in games, there's still fun in games, but maybe the way how you interpret what is fun in games has actually changed. Second wild assertion. Maybe the fun has truly been lost by many making games. So games that feel like a monumental project to create sometimes are monumentally boring to play. If something isn't done as a passion product or passion project, where somebody actually cares about the game, then sometimes that actually shines through, right? Sometimes you can actually tell on the handiwork of a product or the handiwork of a piece of art whether or not the artist or the worker actually cared about what they were working on. And sometimes people just don't. Sometimes you're just clocking in. Sometimes you're clocking out, clocking in, collecting a paycheck. For games that are made on deadlines, by deadlines, pushed through on deadlines, and simply sold because we've got to sell it, maybe the reason why it's not fun is because it wasn't fun to make. Third wild assertion, maybe games aren't scratching a particular itch for your own motivations at the moment. Here in a second, I'm going to reference several different research projects and talks given at GDC or other research that's been conducted with inside the gaming industry. And I would just say motivations change over time. And so regardless of what your motivations are right now, it could be that some games right now just aren't scratching your motivations to play. So it could be that you're looking at games and going, oh, nothing is fun. What happened to the gaming industry? But it could actually be that, again, that you're the one that's actually changed, or that your motivations aren't simply being itched right now because maybe that's where the industry isn't identifying there's a big business market to actually make money from. So if you're looking at a game and you're saying, or you're looking at the wide spectrum of games and saying nothing looks fun right now, maybe try to actually broaden your horizons. Maybe it's because you've played too much of the same stuff and you actually need to broaden your horizons in terms of the genres that you are enjoying or playing. Maybe you've moved on from one target demographic into another, and so different stuff appeals to you now. So there is some very, very compelling evidence, mostly from Nick Yee's presentation at GDC, which again will be linked down in the video description below, that one of the biggest demographic changes in gaming that happen to our gamer motivations as we change as people isn't actually whether we're male or female, but it's actually the age that we are at. So that our motivations and our gaming desires as we are playing and interacting with games as a hobby changes as we age. This is a fascinating hypothesis, and so you might simply look at it and say, you know what, back in the 80s or the 90s or the early 2000s, games were this way, and I really enjoyed these games. I would simply counter that by saying, go play those games that you used to enjoy. Go play them and see what you still enjoy now. Go play something from 20 years ago and see if you still enjoy it. It could be that you're just looking back with rose-colored glasses and saying, oh, things were so much better back then, when they're actually not. It could be that you're actually going to play an old classic and go, hey, I really love this game, and I'm so glad Iron told me to go back and play it because I really do love it. It also could be that you go back and you appreciate the game and say, you know what, I did love this game at one time, but my motivations are different now because I've moved into another age demographic and my motivations have changed. And so while this game was fun for me at one time, it's no longer fun for me now. All right, so let us know down in the comments, what do you think has happened to fun in games? Do you think games are still fun? How has your own enjoyment of games changed over time? Do you think games are made with a different mindset with esports or multiplayer in mind due to the internet, due to Twitch, due to YouTube? Leave us a comment down below. I always love interacting, and I really enjoy these extended discussions that we have because so many of you leave me so many thoughtful comments down below, and I love interacting with the thoughts and the comments and the feedback that you guys all have. So thanks so much in advance for dropping a comment down below, and I look forward to the discussions that we have on this particular topic about whatever happened to fun in games. Those of you that are looking for further study and for further resources on some of the topics that we've covered today, I would recommend these 4 things for you to do. You can go and read the Games Lab 2008 research, which I posted on our YouTube community page over the weekend. That will, of course, be hot linked down below in the video description. It is a wonderful research study on human motivations. So what motivate humans in general, and then how do those things that motivate us in general, how do those things motivate us in games? Then also Jason Vandenberg from Ubisoft. He was either the lead developer or one of the lead devel on For Honor. So those of you that have enjoyed For Honor, you might enjoy his talk about player motivations and player models. It's an exceptional talk from GDC. Also, Quantric Foundry's Nick Yee, which I've referenced that a couple of times throughout the video, is an exceptional talk. All of those info and stats that I just gave you about demographics and how our motivations change over time, that is all from Nick Yee's talk from Quantric Foundry. And then, of course, Mark Rosewater on 20 lessons learned from 20 years in Magic the Gathering. He's a Wizards of the Coast developer, and he's one of the lead guys over there that makes decisions about design choices in Magic the Gathering. An exceptional talk about how player motivations and player feedback goes into the design process in general for Wizards of the Coast and for Magic the Gathering. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope that today is the day that you find a game you genuinely enjoy and then go play the hell out of it. Thanks so much for watching.
Nice patrons, yes, good patrons. They're so kind and supportive.
I can't believe you watched that thing. That was good job. You did it. You got through the whole video. Yay.